The rain had stopped just before sunset, leaving the gardens of Vance Manor glistening with silver dew. Lady Elara Vance sat by the tall window of her chamber, her cane resting against the velvet cushion of her chair. The carved handle, shaped like a swan, caught the fading light, throwing small reflections onto the walls. Once, she had loved that cane, a gift from her father when she was learning to walk again after the accident. Now, it reminded her of everything she had lost. She traced the thin scar along her left leg through the fabric of her dress. The doctors had called it a miracle that she survived. Society had called it a tragedy. Elara called it her cage. Outside, the sound of carriage wheels echoed through the courtyard. The first guests were arriving for the Feast of Masks, the grandest ball of the year. From her window, she could already see the glow of lanterns and hear laughter floating through the cool evening air. Her mother's voice broke the silence. "Elara, you're not dressed yet." Lady Marianne Vance swept into the room like a storm of perfume and silk. "The tailor has worked all week on that gown, and the Duke's son will be there tonight. You cannot make a scene by being late." Elara didn't look away from the window. "Mother, must I go? They'll only whisper again. You know how they talk." Her mother sighed impatiently. "You must stop caring what people say. If you hide, they'll believe you have something to be ashamed of." "I do have something to be ashamed of," Elara said quietly. "I limped through my own engagement ball. I fell in front of half the nobility of Eldamere. I lost Lord Cedric that same night. You can't pretend it didn't happen." Lady Marianne pursed her lips. "Cedric's behavior was disgraceful. But you must understand, dear, men are simple creatures. They want beauty, perfection. We must show them you are still desirable." Elara gave a bitter laugh. "Still desirable? I can barely walk without pain, mother." Marianne softened a little, reaching out to touch her daughter's shoulder. "You are still beautiful, Elara. More than you know. The right man will see it." Elara turned her gaze back to the window. "Or the wrong one will pretend to." For a moment, neither spoke. The soft ticking of the clock filled the silence. Then Marianne said briskly, "You will attend. You will smile. You will dance if someone asks. And you will not, under any circumstances, sit in that corner with that gloomy expression. Do you understand?" Elara sighed, resigned. "Yes, mother." When her mother left, Elara rose slowly from the chair, gripping her cane for balance. Her leg ached, it always did when it rained. She moved to the mirror and looked at herself. The girl staring back was a stranger, pale skin, faint shadows under her eyes, the beauty of her youth dulled by exhaustion. Her emerald dress shimmered faintly, fitted perfectly around her slender waist. Anyone looking at her might have thought her a picture of grace until they noticed the cane. She reached up and touched her reflection lightly. "You'll never be who you were," she whispered to herself. "But maybe you can be someone new." When the carriage came to take them to Ravenholm Palace, Elara settled into the seat beside her mother. The ride was long and silent, broken only by the rhythm of the horses' hooves. She tried to calm her nerves by watching the lights of the city fade into rolling hills. Her mother finally spoke. "Remember, darling, head high. Smile. You are a Vance." "Yes, mother," Elara murmured, though her hands were trembling slightly. By the time they reached the palace gates, her heart was pounding. The grand marble building rose against the night sky, lit by hundreds of torches and chandeliers. Gold and crystal shimmered from every window. The laughter of nobles drifted out into the cold night. Elara clutched her cane and took a deep breath. One night. You can survive one night. The ballroom of Ravenholm Palace was dazzling, a sea of color and light. Gilded mirrors reflected the glow of 1,000 candles. Musicians played a lively waltz while couples in masks of silver and gold spun across the marble floor. The air smelled of perfume, wine, and something faintly metallic. Elara stood near the edge of the room, her mother already swept into conversation with a group of matrons. She leaned slightly on her cane, trying to appear at ease. The polished floor gleamed like ice beneath her feet. A group of young women in glittering gowns passed by, whispering behind their fans. "Is that Lady Elara?" one said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I heard she never recovered from her accident. Another giggled. Recovered? She can hardly stand. Look at her, she's limping. Ilara's throat tightened. She turned away, pretending not to hear. Her eyes found the orchestra, then the chandeliers, anywhere but the people. But the whispers followed. She used to be so beautiful. Such a shame. I heard her fiancé left her for her own cousin. Her hand trembled on the cane. She forced herself to breathe slowly. Lady Vance. A cheerful male voice broke through her thoughts. Turning, she saw Lord Harland, a family friend, approaching with 2 glasses of wine. It's been far too long. May I say, you look lovely tonight. Ilara smiled politely. You're kind, my lord. How have you been? They spoke for a few minutes, safe topics, polite laughter. But when the first dance began, Harland's eyes flicked briefly to her cane before he excused himself with an awkward smile. Forgive me, Lady Vance. I promised this dance to another. Of course, he had. Ilara watched him walk away, her smile fading. The music swelled, and couples flooded the dance floor. The women twirled, their skirts blooming like flowers. The men laughed and spun them gracefully. Ilara stood at the edge, alone. She had once loved to dance. Now, she could only watch. Her mother appeared at her side, fanning herself. You're not even trying, she scolded softly. At least speak with someone. I was speaking, Ilara replied. He left. Marianne sighed. Then find another. Lord Cedric is here tonight. Perhaps he'll see sense. Ilara's chest tightened at the name. Mother, please. But it was too late. Cedric was already crossing the ballroom, his golden mask gleaming, his arm linked with a new companion, Lady Viola, Ilara's former friend. Their laughter cut through the music like glass. When Cedric's eyes met hers, he smiled, not kindly, but mockingly. Lady Ilara, he said as they drew near. I see you're well enough to attend after all. I'm stronger than I look, Ilara said, forcing calm. Viola's eyes sparkled with mischief. Oh, I'm sure you are. Though I must admit, I envy your courage, coming here after everything. Ilara's fingers tightened on her cane. Courage has never been my problem. Cedric chuckled. Still sharp-tongued, I see. Pity. A softer heart might have saved you. Marianne stepped forward, her voice icy. Lord Cedric, I suggest you remember your manners. He bowed mockingly. My apologies, Lady Vance. I wish your daughter every happiness. As they walked away, Ilara felt her face burn. Around her, the music went on, laughter ringing from every corner. But for her, the world had gone silent. She wanted to vanish. She turned toward the balcony, seeking air, and then the room went still. The grand doors at the top of the staircase swung open. A man stepped inside, tall and dressed in black velvet, his mask a simple dark design edged in silver. His hair was jet black, his skin pale as marble, and his eyes, though partially hidden, seemed to catch every flicker of light. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd. Who is he? Is that? It can't be Prince Lucien Vale? The missing heir. Ilara frowned. Prince Lucien? The name was the stuff of legend, the youngest son of the royal line who had disappeared years ago. Some said he'd died in exile. Others whispered of darker fates. Now he stood at the top of the stairs, alive or something like it. As he descended, the crowd parted instinctively. Every movement he made was graceful, deliberate. Even the musicians faltered for a moment before continuing. His presence seemed to command the very air around him. Ilara couldn't look away. There was something strange about him, something magnetic, dangerous. When his gaze swept across the ballroom, it lingered on her. For a heartbeat, she thought she imagined it. Then he began to walk straight toward her. Her heart skipped. People turned to stare. Her mother whispered, Ilara, he's coming this way. Lucien stopped before her and inclined his head slightly. His voice was smooth, rich, and deep. Lady Vance, isn't it? Ilara blinked. Yes, Your Highness. I am told you once danced beautifully, he said. Will you honor me with a dance tonight? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Her mother's fan froze midair. Ilara felt her pulse racing. I can't, she stammered. My leg. Lucien's lips curved slightly. I am not asking for perfection, my lady. Only for a moment of your company. She hesitated, aware of every eye in the room. Cedric's smirk burned at the edge of her vision. The mocking laughter of Lady Viola still rang in her ears. If she refused, they would call her timid. If she accepted, she might humiliate herself. Lucien extended his hand. His skin was pale but strong, steady. Trust me, he said softly. Something in his tone, firm, certain, kind, reached a part of her that had been silent for months. Slowly, she placed her gloved hand in his. A murmur rose through the crowd. Lucien led her onto the dance floor. When the orchestra began again, she tensed, fearing the pain that would come when she tried to move. But Lucien didn't lead her through the usual waltz. His steps were slower, more fluid, designed to match her movements. His hand supported her lightly at her waist, and somehow, she felt balanced, weightless. Breathe, he whispered. Follow the rhythm, not the pain. And she did. Step by step, she moved with him. Her cane rested against a nearby chair, forgotten. The room faded until there was only the music and the steady strength of his arm. The fear in her chest began to melt away, replaced by something warm, fierce, and alive. You're making this look easy, she murmured. Lucien smiled faintly. No, my lady. You're making it beautiful. For the first time in months, Elara laughed a real laugh, light and surprised. The sound startled even her. Around them, whispers turned to stunned silence. The nobles who had mocked her now watched in disbelief as she glided across the marble floor with the dark prince. Her emerald gown shimmered like liquid moonlight, her eyes bright with something close to joy. When the dance ended, the ballroom erupted into applause. Elara froze, unsure what to do. Lucien bowed gracefully and brought her hand to his lips. Thank you, Lady Vance, he said quietly. You have reminded me that broken things can still move with grace. She blushed, unsure how to answer. You speak as though you've known what it's like to be broken. His dark eyes met hers. Perhaps I have. Before she could reply, he turned and melted into the crowd, leaving behind the echo of his words and the faint, unshakable feeling that her life had just changed forever. When the last note of the waltz faded, Elara stood motionless, her pulse still racing. The applause was fading into murmurs, awed, confused, disbelieving. She tried to steady her breathing, clutching her cane as if to remind herself that she was real. That what had just happened was not a dream. Her mother rushed to her side, eyes wide. Elara, she whispered breathlessly, do you understand what you've done? You just danced with Prince Lucien Vale, the most mysterious man in the kingdom. Elara blinked. His, real? I thought he was only a story. Marianne fanned herself nervously. Oh, his real. And apparently, his noticed you. Her voice was a mix of shock and glee. Half the room nearly fainted. You've turned every head in this ballroom. Mother, please. Elara tried to calm her, but her own heart was pounding too hard. She looked across the crowd, trying to catch a glimpse of Lucien again. He was gone, vanished into the sea of faces and masks. Her mother continued, do you know what this means? The prince hasn't attended a single ball in years. And yet tonight, he danced with you. Everyone saw it. Elara shook her head, overwhelmed. He only danced with me out of pity. He must have seen how they mocked me. Men like him don't act out of pity, Marianne said sharply. They act with purpose. You must keep your head clear and your manners perfect. If he speaks to you again, you will charm him. But as her mother spoke, Elara's eyes caught the sight of someone else, Lord Cedric, standing at the far end of the ballroom, his face dark with something that was not amusement. His new fiancée, Lady Viola, was whispering in his ear, a sly smile on her lips. When their eyes met, Cedric smirked and raised his glass in mock salute. Elara turned away, heat burning her cheeks. He's furious, she muttered. Let him be, her mother said briskly. For once, it's you they're whispering about, and not with pity. Elara didn't respond. She excused herself quietly and walked toward the balcony, each step measured. The cool night air brushed her face as she stepped outside, the laughter and music dulling behind her. The stars above were clear and sharp against the dark sky. She leaned against the marble railing, trying to collect her thoughts. The dance replayed in her mind in flashes, his steady hand, the way he had matched her steps perfectly, his words, "You have reminded me that broken things can still move with grace." She closed her eyes. No one had ever said something like that to her before. Not with truth. Not without pity. Behind her, a door opened. "Lady Vance," came a familiar voice, smooth, low, and unmistakable. "Hiding already?" She turned, startled. Prince Lucien stood in the doorway, his mask now removed. Without it, his face was striking, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that seemed older than they should be, and a faint smile that did not quite reach his eyes. "I thought you had vanished," she said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "I do that sometimes," he replied with a trace of humor. "Too many questions in crowded rooms. Too many people who want something." "And what do you want, Your Highness?" she asked, half teasing, half wary. He stepped closer, the light from the ballroom spilling faintly across his face. "I wanted a moment to speak to the only person here who looked real." "Real," she repeated. "Yes." His eyes didn't waver. "Everyone here wears masks, even when they're not required. You, however, carry your truth openly. That takes courage." Ilara laughed softly. "You mistake it for courage. It's simply that I have no choice." Lucien studied her for a long moment. "Everyone has a choice, Lady Vance. You could have stayed home tonight, hidden away. But you came." "I came because my mother insisted," she admitted. "And yet, you danced because you chose to," he said quietly. "Even though you feared falling." Ilara hesitated. "How did you know?" "I could feel it," he said simply. "Fear changes the way people move. But you did not let it stop you. That is what makes you remarkable." His words struck something deep inside her. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. "I don't think I'm remarkable, my lord. I think I'm just surviving." Lucien's smile softened. "Then you and I have that in common." Before she could ask what he meant, voices echoed from inside, her mother's laughter, Cedric's deeper tone. Lucien turned toward the sound, his expression tightening slightly. "You should return," he said. "They'll miss you." She nodded slowly. "Will I see you again?" He paused, then said with a faint smile, "Perhaps. The night is still young." As he walked back into the crowd, Ilara stood for a long moment, watching the shadows swallow him whole. That night, when she returned home, she could not sleep. The candlelight flickered against her bedroom wall as she sat by the window, her mind spinning with confusion. She had come to the feast expecting humiliation. Instead, she had danced with the most mysterious man in the kingdom, a man whose eyes seemed to hold centuries of stories. When she finally drifted to sleep, one thought echoed in her mind. Why did he choose me? The next morning dawned grey and cold, the kind of morning that promised rain. Ilara woke with aching legs and a head full of dreams. The memory of the dance felt both vivid and impossible. It had the hazy glow of something half-imagined, like a story whispered in candlelight. Downstairs, her mother was already entertaining visitors. The sound of teacups clinking and feminine laughter floated through the sitting room. "Ilara, darling," Lady Marianne called as soon as she entered. "You're awake at last. Come in. You have admirers." Ilara blinked. "Admirers? Everyone is talking about last night," her mother said proudly. "Lady Thornfield, Lord Grey, even the Duchess of Winton, they all want to know how you captured Prince Lucien's attention." Ilara flushed. "I didn't capture anything. He asked me to dance, that's all." The room erupted in laughter. "Oh, my dear," Lady Thornfield said kindly. "Men like that don't just ask. He could have had anyone. And yet, he chose you. There's something romantic about it, isn't there?" "Utterly," another woman agreed. "A fallen heiress and a haunted prince, it's practically a fairy tale." Ilara forced a smile. Fairy tales usually end before the morning. The women laughed again, but her mother shot her a warning look. "Nonsense. It's the start of something wonderful. Perhaps he'll call on us." But the idea filled Ilara not with hope, but unease. There was something about Lucien's eyes, the depth of them, the sadness that lingered in her thoughts. He didn't seem like a man looking for romance. He seemed like someone searching for something else entirely. The visitors left just after noon, leaving the house filled with the faint scent of perfume and gossip. Ilara retreated to the library, where the quiet soothed her nerves. She sank into the window seat with a book, though she couldn't focus on the words. The rain had started again, soft and steady. When the knock came, she didn't move at first. The servants would answer it. But moments later, footsteps echoed down the hall, followed by the butler's uncertain voice. "My lady," he said, peering into the library. "There's a gentleman here to see you." Ilara looked up. "A gentleman?" "Yes, my lady. He says his name is Lord Vale." Her heart skipped. "Lord Vale?" The butler nodded. "He insists he won't stay long." Before she could think, Lucian stepped into the room. He wore no mask now, only a dark coat that matched his eyes. The air around him seemed to shift, the quiet room suddenly too small. Even the firelight flickered uncertainly. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his tone polite but soft. "I was passing through the village and thought to deliver something you left behind." He reached into his coat and held out her silver-handled cane. Ilara blinked. "My cane, I thought one of the servants would have returned it." "They tried," he said. "But I wished to return it myself." She took it from him, fingers brushing his cool hand. "Thank you. You didn't have to trouble yourself." "It was no trouble." His gaze lingered on her, unreadable. "May I sit?" "Yes, of course," she said quickly, motioning to the chair by the fire. As he sat, the rain tapped softly against the windows. For a moment, neither spoke. Ilara studied him carefully. He seemed perfectly at ease, yet there was something about him, an intensity beneath the calm. "You've been the subject of quite a lot of conversation," she said finally. "Half the city is talking about your sudden reappearance." He smiled faintly. "Let them talk. People fear what they cannot understand, and they crave what they fear." "That's a rather dark way of putting it." "It's a rather truthful one," he replied. Ilara tilted her head. "And what is it they don't understand about you, my lord?" His eyes met hers. "That I am not what I appear to be." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ilara felt her heart beat faster. "You mean your reputation?" she asked carefully. "The stories?" "Perhaps," he said. "But tell me, Lady Vance, do you believe in stories?" She hesitated. "I suppose I want to. They're easier to believe in than reality." "And what is your reality?" he asked gently. She looked away, fingers tightening on her cane. "That I was broken in an accident I barely remember. That the man who once promised to love me couldn't bear to look at me afterward. That I am tolerated by a society that pities me." Lucian's expression softened. "And yet you stood before all of them last night. You faced their cruelty and still dared to dance." "I didn't feel brave," she murmured. "Courage rarely feels like courage in the moment," he said quietly. "It feels like survival." She looked at him then, really looked. The firelight flickered in his eyes, but there was no reflection, only depth. Endless, shadowed depth. A small chill ran down her spine. "Who are you really, my lord?" she whispered. Lucian smiled faintly. "Someone who has lived long enough to know that pain does not make you weak. It makes you see clearly." The sound of footsteps broke the spell. Her mother appeared in the doorway, eyes wide at the sight of their guest. "Your Highness." "What an honor." Lucian rose smoothly and bowed. "Lady Vance. Forgive my unannounced visit." Marianne was nearly speechless. "Not at all, my lord. We're overwhelmed." "I was just leaving," Lucian said politely, glancing back at Ilara. "Thank you for your time, Lady Vance." She stood quickly. "Will I see you again?" He paused at the door. "That depends," he said softly. "Do you wish to?" Her throat tightened. "I don't know." Lucian's smile deepened slightly. "Then perhaps you should decide before our next meeting." And then he was gone, a shadow fading into the rain, leaving behind the faint scent of night air and the echo of something she could not name. Ilara stood in silence, her cane cool in her hand. Her mother's voice buzzed distantly, words like opportunity and incredible and fate, but Ilara barely heard her. Because somewhere deep inside, she knew that her life had shifted again. The dance had been only the beginning. The prince who moved like a ghost had just stepped into her world, and she could no longer tell if she was afraid or enchanted. The morning after Lucien's visit, the sky hung heavy and grey, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Ilara tried to distract herself with her usual routines, reading, tending to the small herb garden near the kitchen window, but nothing helped. Every sound, every flicker of light reminded her of him, the echo of his calm voice, the weight of his gaze, the way he had spoken as if he saw straight through her. By afternoon, her mother's excitement had reached a fever pitch. Lady Marianne fluttered about the house giving orders to servants, arranging flowers, and choosing fabrics for dresses that did not yet exist. "Ilara," she said, bursting into the sitting room, "we must prepare for when Prince Lucien calls again." Ilara didn't look up from her book. "You don't even know that he will call again." "Of course he will. Men like that do not appear by accident. He's interested. Any fool could see it." Ilara sighed. "Or maybe he's just kind." "Kind?" Her mother laughed, a sharp, nervous sound. "Kindness is not what makes a man return a lady's forgotten cane in person." He was testing the waters. "Now it's your turn to respond properly." Ilara frowned. "Properly? You mean pretending to be someone I'm not?" Marianne's smile faltered. "Darling, you must stop punishing yourself. You're not ruined. You're still beautiful, intelligent, charming. But if you keep acting like a recluse, no man, even one as strange as the prince, will have the patience to look twice." "Maybe I don't want him to look twice," Ilara said quietly. But even as she spoke the words, a small voice inside her whispered a truth she didn't want to face. She did want him to look twice. She wanted him to look and see her, not the limp, not the scar, but her. That night, she went to bed restless, listening to the wind against the windows. Somewhere beyond the hills, thunder rolled like a distant drum. When she finally fell asleep, her dreams were full of shadows, dancing, swirling shapes, and a pair of dark eyes that watched her from the edge of the light. 2 nights later, the invitation came. A messenger arrived just before dusk, his cloak wet with rain. He bowed low and handed over a sealed envelope bearing the crest of a silver wolf, the symbol of House Vale. Marianne almost fainted with delight. "Ilara, it's from him," she exclaimed, breaking the seal with trembling hands. Her eyes widened as she read. "He's invited us to dinner at his estate, tonight." Ilara's heart leapt and then sank just as quickly. "Tonight? That's impossible. We'd never be ready." "Nonsense," her mother said. "We'll be ready in an hour. I'll have the servants prepare the carriage." "But, mother." "Ilara," Marianne said firmly, gripping her shoulders, "do you understand what this means? He wants you there. You. Don't let fear ruin this chance." Ilara wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. She looked down at her hands, remembering how steady his had felt around hers. Perhaps this meeting wasn't a trap or a test. Perhaps it was simply meant to be. By the time the carriage reached the gates of Vale Manor, darkness had fallen. The iron gates creaked open, revealing a long path lined with ancient trees and lanterns that flickered with a strange bluish light. The manor itself stood at the end of the drive, tall, elegant, and old as time, its stone walls glowing faintly in the moonlight. When they stepped inside, Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. The air was cool and carried a faint scent of roses and candle wax. Servants moved silently through the corridors, their faces expressionless, their steps soundless. Lucien appeared at the top of the grand staircase, dressed in black as always. He smiled faintly as he descended. "Lady Vance. Lady Marianne. Welcome to Vale Manor." "Your Highness," Marianne said with a deep curtsy. "We are honored." "The honor is mine," Lucien replied, his eyes lingering briefly on Ilara. "I hope your journey was not too difficult." Ilara shook her head. "It was beautiful." "I'm glad to hear it," he said. "Dinner is ready." They followed him into a dining hall lit entirely by candlelight. The table gleamed with silver and crystal. Portraits of long-dead nobles lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to watch in silence. The conversation began politely enough: politics, art, the weather. But as the meal went on, Marianne began to dominate, speaking eagerly about her daughter's talents. "Ilara has the finest hand for sketching gardens," she said proudly. "Our rose terrace was her design." Lucien looked intrigued. "Is that so? You design gardens?" "I used to," Ilara said softly. "Before the accident." "And now?" he asked. She hesitated. "Now I imagine them. It's easier that way." Lucien nodded thoughtfully. "Then you must come see my gardens tomorrow. They could use a dreamer's touch." Her mother nearly dropped her fork. "She would be delighted." Ilara's pulse quickened. "I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense," Lucien interrupted gently. "It would please me." For the rest of the evening, she found herself watching him in the flicker of candlelight. His face was calm, his words measured, but there was something behind his composure, a kind of ancient sadness, like a song played in a minor key. When the dinner ended, Lucien led them through the main hall to the door. "I'll send the carriage back for you tomorrow," he said to Ilara. "Afternoon. The roses bloom best under the late sun." As he handed her into the carriage, his fingers brushed hers. For an instant, she felt a pulse of warmth, or was it cold? She couldn't tell. It left her dizzy. All the way home, her mother spoke excitedly about their fortune. But Ilara said nothing. Her heart was too full of questions. What kind of man lived in such a quiet, haunted house? And why, out of all the women in the kingdom, had he chosen to notice her? The next day dawned soft and golden, a rare break in the autumn rain. Ilara rose early, nerves thrumming like a harp string. Her mother insisted she wear her pale blue gown, the one that makes your eyes look like jewels, and a matching ribbon in her hair. By the time the carriage from Vale Manor arrived, she felt like her heart might pound right out of her chest. The ride was shorter in daylight, though the forest that surrounded the estate seemed darker now, the trees thick and ancient. When the manor came into view, it looked less forbidding than before, beautiful in a lonely, quiet way. Lucien met her at the entrance himself. "You came," he said, his tone warm but soft. "You invited me," she said, smiling nervously. "I couldn't refuse." He offered his arm. "Then allow me to show you the gardens." They stepped through a side door into a vast courtyard filled with roses. The blooms were strange, dark crimson, deep violet, silver-white colors she had never seen before. The air was thick with their scent. "They bloom under moonlight," Lucien said, watching her reaction. "Some call them ghost roses." "They're beautiful," she whispered, touching a petal lightly. "They look alive even in shadow." He smiled faintly. "Most beauty hides in shadow, Lady Vance. The sun only makes it loud." She turned to look at him. "You speak like a poet." "Perhaps once I was," he said. "A very long time ago." Ilara tilted her head. "You make it sound as though you've lived 100 years. Lucien's gaze didn't waver. "Sometimes it feels that way." They walked slowly down the path, her hand resting lightly on his arm. He matched his pace perfectly to hers, never once glancing at her cane. For a while, they said nothing. The wind stirred the roses, and a few petals drifted down like red snow. "Last night," she said finally, "I couldn't stop thinking about something you said." "And what was that?" "You said you weren't what you appeared to be." "What did you mean?" He looked out across the garden, eyes distant. "The truth is, complicated. But perhaps it's enough to say that I've lived more than one lifetime. Some filled with light. Some with less." She frowned, trying to understand. "You speak in riddles, my lord." "Because riddles are safer than truths," he said softly. "Truth can frighten people away." She met his eyes. "I don't frighten easily." He smiled then, a real smile this time. "No, I don't suppose you do." They came to a fountain at the garden's center, its basin carved with silver wolves. Water sparkled like liquid glass as it fell. Lucien motioned for her to sit on the marble edge. "I asked you here for another reason," he said after a moment. "Not just to see the roses." Ilara's heart skipped. "Another reason?" "Yes." He turned to face her fully. "I've watched you, Lady Vance. You endure cruelty and condescension with more grace than most nobles show in their finest moments. You possess strength that others mistake for fragility. I find that remarkable. She flushed. You make me sound far better than I am. I make you sound as you are, he said simply. Silence fell between them, the kind of silence that hums with meaning. The air around them seemed to thicken, the fountain's gentle trickle grew louder. Finally, Elara said quietly, you see too much. Lucian's voice was almost a whisper. And you hide too much. He reached out then, brushing his fingers lightly over her hand. His touch was cool but steady, and the world seemed to narrow until only that contact existed. Elara, he said softly, there are people who will never understand you. They will measure your worth by what you can't do. Let them. You owe them nothing. Her throat tightened. You speak as if you've lived that kind of life. A shadow flickered across his face. Perhaps I have. She wanted to ask more, but something in his eyes warned her not to. There was depth there, ancient, endless, aching depth that she wasn't ready to face. Instead, she said softly, you make it sound as if pain is a gift. Sometimes, he said, it is. Pain teaches us what kindness truly means. It reminds us that beauty can bloom from what's been broken. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the roses swaying gently around them. Then, faintly, from somewhere inside the manor, a bell chimed. Lucian rose, offering his hand. It's nearly evening, he said. You should return before the roads grow dark. She took his hand, letting him help her to her feet. Will I see you again? He studied her for a heartbeat. Do you wish to? Yes, she said before she could stop herself. Lucian's smile returned, small, mysterious. Then yes, you will. As he walked her back through the rose paths, she noticed that the flowers seemed to glow faintly under the fading light, as if they remembered the moon already. When they reached the carriage, he paused. Elara, he said quietly, if anyone tells you you're less because you move differently, remember this. The strongest trees grow twisted by the wind. She met his eyes. And what about you, my lord? What twisted you? His gaze turned inward, distant. The kind of wind that never dies. Before she could speak again, he helped her into the carriage and stepped back. As the horses started forward, she leaned out the window for one last glimpse. Lucian stood at the gate, watching, his black coat blending into the gathering dusk. And though the distance grew between them, she could still feel the pull, strange and certain, that told her she would see him again. The following week passed in a haze of rumors. Everywhere Elara went, people whispered about the reclusive Prince Vale and his broken heiress. Servants carried gossip like wildfire. Every glance in the market, every soft laugh in the corridors of Vance Manor made her skin prickle. Her mother thrived on the attention. Let them talk, Lady Marianne said, standing at her vanity and pinning pearls into her hair. If they're talking, they're watching. And if they're watching, he'll have to act soon. Elara wasn't so sure. She'd spent every day since her visit to Vale Manor reliving every word Lucian had said. She could still see the moonlight reflecting in his eyes, the way his hand had brushed hers in the rose garden. But there was something behind it, a darkness she couldn't name, and a sense that he was holding something terrible back. The answer came one evening in the form of another letter. The seal of the silver wolf gleamed under the candlelight. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was elegant and deliberate. Lady Vance. I ask again for your company, this time at midnight. Come to Vale Manor alone. Bring no servants. Trust me, and I will show you what few have ever seen. L. Her mother nearly dropped her teacup when she read it. At midnight. Alone? Absolutely not. Mother, please. Elara, that man is dangerous. A prince, yes, but a strange one. No one knows where he's been or what he's done these past 10 years. Then maybe I should be the one to find out, Elara said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Marianne hesitated. You're serious? I am. Her mother pressed her lips together, torn between fear and pride. Then you will at least take the family crest pendant. It will mark you as a noblewoman. Even in madness, people respect symbols. By the time the clock struck 11, Elara was already dressed in a dark cloak, her cane tapping softly against the stone floor. She left without another word, her heart racing. The road to Vale Manor was shrouded in mist, the trees twisting overhead like reaching hands. The carriage Lucien had sent waited for her at the crossroads. Its driver, silent and pale, nodded once as she climbed inside. When they arrived, the manor's gates opened soundlessly. Candles burned in every window, but no servants waited at the door. Only Lucien stood there, dressed in black as always, his expression unreadable. "You came," he said quietly. "I did. I worried you might not." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But curiosity is stronger than fear." He smiled faintly. "Good. You'll need that tonight." Without another word, he led her through the grand hall, past rooms filled with portraits that seemed to watch her, and down a corridor she had not seen before. The air grew colder as they descended a spiral staircase into the earth. The flickering torches revealed carvings on the walls, symbols she didn't recognize. At last, they entered a vast underground chamber. It was circular, with a domed ceiling painted with constellations. In the center stood a marble pedestal, and on it lay a silver chalice engraved with the same wolf emblem. "What is this place?" she whispered. Lucien's voice echoed softly. "A sanctuary. A reminder of who I am and what I am bound to." He walked to the pedestal, resting his hand on the chalice. "For centuries, my family ruled more than land. We guarded the balance between life and death. But we paid a price. When I inherited the title of Vale, I inherited its curse." Elara's pulse quickened. "A curse?" He turned to face her. "I am not as you are. My body endures time differently. My heart beats slower. My blood runs colder. I am sustained by what this chalice represents, a bond written in blood centuries ago." She took a step back, her voice barely a whisper. "You mean you're—" "Yes," he said, his tone calm. "A creature born of shadow and hunger. But I have never taken unwillingly. Never harmed one who did not understand what they offered." Elara stared at him. "And you brought me here to offer?" "No," his voice softened. "To choose. You deserve truth before you decide whether to ever see me again." Her mind reeled. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet something deeper rooted her to the spot. He wasn't threatening her, he was confessing, bearing the secret that had made him a ghost in his own world. "I should be terrified," she murmured. He stepped closer, his gaze steady. "And are you?" She met his eyes. "No. Only, sad." He blinked, surprised. "Sad?" "For you," she said quietly. "To live so long, to see centuries pass, and to carry this alone." A shadow of pain crossed his face. "You see too much." "Perhaps," she said. "But you invited me to." Lucien turned to the chalice, lifted it, and held it toward her. "This cup once sealed my family's oath to protect, not to destroy. Tonight, I renew it. With witness." Before she could ask what he meant, he drew a small blade from his coat and cut his palm. The blood glowed faintly in the torchlight, not red, but deep silver. He poured a drop into the chalice, and the carvings on the walls shimmered. "You must not tell the world what you have seen," he said softly. "But you may tell me whether you still wish to walk beside me." Elara looked at the chalice, at the man before her, immortal, cursed, yet still so terribly human. "If I said yes," she asked, "what would that mean?" "That you see me not as a monster, but as a man." She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his injured one. His blood was cool against her skin. "Then I see you." He exhaled a breath that sounded almost like relief. "Then the oath is shared." The torches flared. The constellations painted on the ceiling seemed to shimmer and rearrange themselves. Elara swayed, dizzy. When she blinked, they were back in the upper hall, as if no time had passed. Lucien looked pale, but his eyes held a strange light. "You should rest now," he said gently. "You've seen too much for one night." She wanted to ask how they had returned so quickly, but exhaustion pulled at her limbs. He led her to the door, where the night air was cold and clear. "Elara," he said before she stepped into the carriage, "there will be talk of me, terrible talk. Do not believe all of it." She looked up at him. "I believe what I've seen." And what have you seen? A man trying to be more than his curse. Lucian's smile was faint but real. Then you see better than most. As the carriage carried her home, Elara watched the manor fade into the mist. She knew what she had just witnessed would change everything, not only how she saw him, but how she saw herself. She had faced the truth of what he was and had not run. That alone felt like a kind of power. Morning sunlight streamed through her window when she woke, but it offered no warmth. The memories of the night still clung to her like shadow. She half wondered if she'd dreamt it, the silver blood, the glowing walls, the way Lucian's voice had filled the chamber like a hymn. But when she looked at her hand, she saw it, a faint, silvery mark where his blood had touched her skin. Not a dream, she whispered. At breakfast, her mother noticed her distracted expression. You look pale. Did you sleep at all? Not much, Elara admitted. Was it the prince again? Marianne asked eagerly. Did he send for you? Elara hesitated. No. He didn't. Then what's the matter? Elara couldn't answer. How could she tell her mother that the man she wanted her to marry might not even be fully human? By afternoon, the tension became unbearable. She ordered the carriage herself and returned to Vale Manor. Lucian met her at the door before the servants could announce her. You shouldn't have come unescorted. You said not to tell anyone, she replied. That means I couldn't bring anyone. He sighed softly. Fair enough. They walked together through the hall. She noticed for the first time how the light never seemed to settle fully in this house, how even in daylight, shadows pooled in corners as if alive. You said your family protected something, she began. What did you mean? Lucian paused before a set of tall doors. Would you like to see? He pushed them open, revealing a vast library, shelves upon shelves of books, scrolls, and relics that looked older than any kingdom she knew. The air smelled of parchment and old magic. This is the heart of Vale Manor, he said. Knowledge that the world has forgotten or chosen to forget. Elara wandered between the shelves. What kind of knowledge? Cures for diseases that were never meant to vanish. Maps of lands that no longer exist. Histories of those who lived before the kingdoms rose. And stories of my kind. She looked at him sharply. Your kind? Those who walk between worlds. We are not demons, as your priests say. We are remnants of the first covenant, the guardians of the border between life and death. Elara touched a leather-bound volume on a nearby shelf. And you've guarded this for centuries? He nodded. Because someone must. She turned to him. And now? Lucian looked down at her, his expression unreadable. Now I find myself wondering what happens if I fail. Fail? Every guardian needs balance, he said softly. We were not meant to live alone. The loneliness corrodes us, turns us into the monsters the world fears. Elara's heart thudded. And you think? I'm your balance. I think, he said carefully, that you see the humanity I've been trying to remember. Silence stretched between them, thick and electric. She felt the weight of his words settle deep inside her. I don't know if I can carry that, she whispered. You already are, he said. He reached into his coat and drew out a small pendant shaped like a silver tear. Keep this. It will protect you if ever the shadows grow too close. She took it, feeling the metal's cool pulse against her skin. Protect me from what? From me, he said quietly. That night, when she returned home, she placed the pendant beside her bed and lay awake long after the candles burned out. She thought of his sadness, his strange half-smiles, his words about balance and loneliness. She should have been frightened, but she wasn't. Instead, she felt something else, a pull, a strange and inevitable connection she couldn't break. Outside her window, the wind whispered through the trees. In the faint reflection on the glass, she thought she saw him, standing far away, watching. And though she told herself it was impossible, she whispered into the darkness, I'm not afraid. Somewhere in the unseen night, a voice she couldn't hear answered softly, I know. The days following her last visit to Vale Manor were filled with a silence that stretched too long to be comfortable. Elara tried to focus on her usual tasks, reading, embroidery, tea with her mother, but none of it held her attention. Every candle flicker reminded her of the torches beneath the manor. Every shadow reminded her of Lucian's eyes. The mark on her palm had not faded. It gleamed faintly silver under moonlight, as if part of him lived within her. At night she dreamed of strange things, moonlit corridors, voices calling her name, a pair of hands guiding her through darkness. Each time she woke, her pulse raced, and she whispered his name without meaning to. 3 nights after their last meeting, a messenger arrived again. This one carried no letter, only a single rose, black as midnight, its stem wrapped in silver thread. Tied to it was a short note written in Lucien's elegant hand. The moon is full tonight. If you wish to understand, come to the rose garden. Her mother protested, as expected. At night. Again. Elara, I will not allow it. You have no idea what this man truly wants. Elara met her gaze calmly. He wants honesty. So do I. Before Marianne could argue, Elara wrapped herself in her cloak, took her cane, and left. The carriage arrived without her summoning it, the driver the same silent man as before. The journey to Vale Manor passed in an eerie quiet, the forest alive with whispers and the faint cry of an owl. Lucien waited in the garden, dressed not in his usual dark attire but in a long silver-grey coat that shimmered faintly under the moonlight. The air was cold enough that mist curled from her breath. You came, he said softly. You asked me to. I wasn't sure you'd still trust me. I wouldn't have come if I didn't, she replied. But you owe me truth. Lucien nodded slowly. Then tonight, you will have it. He led her through the rose garden, past marble statues half covered in ivy, until they reached a fountain where the water glowed faintly blue. The roses surrounding it seemed to pulse with life, their petals trembling in the moonlight. I told you my family guarded the border between life and death, he began, standing beside her. What I didn't tell you is what that really means. He turned his gaze to the water, and she saw his reflection, but only for an instant. Then it vanished. Elara's breath caught. Your reflection is gone, he finished quietly. I lost it the night I took the oath of the veil. She stared at him. How? When my father died, the covenant demanded a successor. Our line was bound by an ancient pact, one life renewed by the surrender of another. I accepted, not understanding what it meant. It saved my family, my kingdom, but it cost me my soul. Elara felt the air thicken around them. You mean you? I became what humans call a vampire, Lucien said simply. Not by hunger, but by curse. The blood that sustains me is a remnant of that first exchange. It ties me to both worlds, living and dead. She swallowed hard. And you feed? Yes, he said, voice calm but edged with regret. But I take only from those who consent. There are ways to live without killing. They are not pleasant, but they keep me bound to humanity. He met her eyes. I don't want your fear, Elara. I want your understanding. For a long moment, she said nothing. The wind stirred the roses. She could hear the distant howling of wolves beyond the manor walls. Finally she said, You think I'll run. But I've spent my whole life being looked at as less than human, pitted until I stopped believing in pity. If anything, I understand you more than you think. Lucien blinked, as if her words caught him off guard. You understand me? You wear your curse where no one can see it. I wear mine where everyone can. He exhaled softly, a sound that was almost a laugh. Then perhaps you are the first person in a century who has spoken to me as an equal. You've lived that long, she asked, a note of wonder in her voice. Longer, he admitted. I have seen empires rise and crumble. I have watched people I loved turn to dust. His tone was heavy but steady. Immortality is not a gift, Elara. It is a chain. One I would break if I could. And yet you live, she whispered. Because I must. The oath binds me. But when I saw you, when I saw how you faced the cruelty of this world and still found the strength to stand, I remembered what it meant to feel alive again. He turned to her then, his eyes glowing faintly silver under the moon. I didn't bring you here to frighten you. I brought you here to show you that even monsters crave grace. Elara's throat tightened. And what happens now? That depends, he said quietly. Do you wish to leave or to know more? She hesitated only a heartbeat. I want to know more. Lucien extended his hand. Then walk with me. She placed her hand in his. His skin was cool as marble, but there was strength beneath it, and something almost like warmth at its core. Together they moved deeper into the garden until they reached an old stone archway covered in ivy. Beyond it, the land fell away into a shimmering lake reflecting the full moon. "This is where my oath began," he said. "The place where the living world meets the realm of shadows." Ilara felt her pulse quicken. "It's beautiful. It's dangerous," he warned. "Stay close." He stepped into the archway first, and as she followed, the world shifted. The air thickened. The moon grew brighter, impossibly large, and the water below shimmered like liquid glass. The silence was complete, and in it, she heard faint whispers, not words, but memories. "Is this," she began. "The threshold," he said. "Few mortals can stand here without losing themselves. But you," he looked at her in wonder. "You are steady." She smiled faintly. "You told me once that pain teaches balance." Lucien's gaze softened. "So it does." For a long moment, they stood side by side, two beings bound by different kinds of brokenness, surrounded by beauty born of both light and shadow. When he finally turned to lead her back, his voice was low and certain. "You asked what happens now. The answer is simple. Now, I protect you whether you wish it or not." The next morning, sunlight broke across the sky like molten gold, but Ilara could not shake the images of the night before. She had walked through a place where the air itself hummed with power. She had seen Lucien's reflection vanish like smoke. She had touched the edge of a world that wasn't meant for her. And yet, when she woke, she felt stronger, steadier, as if the shadows had whispered courage into her bones. When her mother asked where she'd been, Ilara lied. "I walked in the garden," she said simply. Marianne frowned. "At midnight. The moon was bright." Her mother eyed her suspiciously but said nothing more. Ilara spent the morning alone in her studio, sketching roses from memory. Only now they were not ordinary roses, they were glowing things with silver veins and petals that seemed to breathe. By noon, another carriage arrived from Vale Manor. The same driver bowed silently, handing her a small note. "If you wish to see what has grown since last night, come before sunset. L." She didn't hesitate. When she arrived at the manor, Lucien was waiting for her in the gardens. But this time, the roses looked different. New buds had appeared overnight, white as frost and glowing faintly. "They bloomed after you left," Lucien said. "No one has ever caused that before." Ilara looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "This garden is bound to me. It responds to power, to emotion. You touched its roots last night. You woke it." She reached down to touch one of the blossoms. The petals were cool, yet they pulsed faintly, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. "It's alive." He nodded. "Like everything touched by shadow." They walked together down the winding paths. The air smelled of rain and roses, the sound of distant water falling from hidden fountains. "Ilara," he said quietly, "you've crossed a threshold most mortals never approach. You've seen what I am. If you wish, I can make you forget, erase the memory of it all. You could return to your life untouched." She shook her head. "No. I don't want to forget." "Then you must understand what that choice means. You are no longer invisible to the old laws. There are others, things older than me, who will sense the mark on you." Her stomach turned. "Mark." "The silver trace on your hand," he said. "It binds our fates together, for better or worse." "Then what happens to me?" "You remain who you are," he said softly. "But you will begin to feel more. The world will grow louder. The night will seem brighter. Your senses will sharpen. It will not harm you unless fear does." She managed a weak smile. "Fear and I are old friends." Lucien stopped walking and turned toward her. "You joke, but you shouldn't have to be brave every moment of your life." "Perhaps not," she said. "But it's the only way I've survived." He looked at her for a long time, then said, "You remind me of someone I once knew. A woman who believed in light even when surrounded by darkness. She was the last mortal who stood where you stood last night." "What happened to her?" His expression darkened. "She chose immortality, and lost herself to it." Ilara shivered. And you think I'll do the same? No, he said. I think you are stronger. They reached the heart of the garden again, the same fountain, now covered in blossoms that seemed to shimmer with a life of their own. Lucien reached into the water and drew out a single white rose. He handed it to her carefully. This one is yours, he said. It grew from where you stood. Elara took it, staring at the flower in awe. It's beautiful. It will never die, he said. As long as you keep it. She looked up at him. Why me, Lucien? You could have chosen anyone. He hesitated, then said quietly, because you look at me and see a man, not a legend, not a curse. I've waited centuries for that. For a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them, her trembling fingers holding the immortal flower, his eyes burning with a sadness that looked almost like hope. Lucien, she whispered, I don't know what this is between us. Then don't name it yet, he said. Just let it grow. They stood there in silence as the sun began to sink, painting the sky in gold and crimson. The white rose in her hand glowed faintly, its petals reflecting the last of the light. When she finally turned to leave, Lucien caught her hand. Remember this, Elara, he said softly. Whatever happens next, you are no longer alone in the dark. She looked at him, feeling the truth of it in her chest. Neither are you. As she walked away, she could feel his gaze following her. The silver pendant at her throat was warm against her skin, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel broken. She felt alive, dangerously, impossibly alive. Behind her, the roses of Vale Manor swayed as if stirred by an unseen wind, their petals glowing in the dying light. And somewhere deep within the shadows, something older than Lucien stirred awake, its attention drawn to the woman who had dared to walk beside him. Elara did not yet know it, but her choice to stay had already rewritten the balance between two worlds. The gossip began before dawn. Servants carried whispers through the markets and down the cobbled streets. Lord Cedric is back from the capital. His carriage had been seen outside the Duke's court, his crest shining brighter than ever. Elara heard the news over breakfast. Her mother's teacup rattled against its saucer. Cedric returning now is no coincidence, Lady Marianne muttered. He's heard of your association with Prince Vale. Men like him never tolerate being forgotten. Elara's stomach tightened. He forgot me years ago. Her mother looked up, eyes sharp. That doesn't mean he'll let you live free of his pride. Promise me you'll be careful. Stay away from public gatherings until the talk dies down. Elara nodded, though part of her was tired of hiding. The mark on her palm glimmered faintly under her gloves. It reminded her of the vow she'd witnessed, Lucien's vow, and of the strange calm she felt whenever she thought of him. By afternoon, the quiet house filled with the clatter of hooves. The butler hurried in. My lady, Lord Cedric requests an audience. Before Elara could object, he strode into the hall. Time had changed him, the same golden hair, the same perfect smile, but there was arrogance now, sharpened like a blade. He bowed low, too formally. Lady Vance, he said. You look, well. Elara rose slowly, leaning on her cane. You sound surprised. He laughed softly. I feared you might have wasted away from heartbreak. Her mother gasped. Lord Cedric, that's unkind. Forgive me. He turned the smile on Marianne, then back to Elara. I speak from concern. Rumors reach the capital, you know, stories about you keeping company with a man who hides from daylight. Elara felt her pulse rise. Those rumors are beneath you. Oh, I'm not sure. Cedric walked a slow circle around the room. Prince Vale. Mysterious. Reclusive. Some say cursed. Others say not entirely human. And yet, somehow, he chooses to entertain a woman once pitied by every noble in Eldamere. He stopped before her. How generous of him. Elara's voice steadied. Lucien's generosity is none of your concern. Lucien. Cedric repeated, tasting the name like poison. So it's first names now. He must have you well under his spell. Enough. Elara's cane struck the marble floor with a sharp sound. You lost the right to speak of me the night you humiliated me in public. For a heartbeat, anger flashed in his eyes. Then the charming smile returned. I came only to remind you that the world is watching. The court does not look kindly on scandal. Keep company with the wrong man, and your family's name will burn. Marianne stepped forward, trembling with fury. You dare threaten us? Advice, Lady Marianne, not threat. Cedric bowed again, his expression smug. Good evening. When the door closed behind him, silence filled the room. Ilara's hands shook. Her mother exhaled slowly. He means to destroy your reputation. He'll spread poison in every ear. Ilara stared at the fire. Then let him. I've already lived through worse than gossip. But that night, long after her mother had gone to bed, she sat awake by the window. Across the fields, she could see the distant silhouette of Vale Manor beneath the rising moon. The pull toward it was stronger than ever, an ache she couldn't name. A sudden knock at the balcony door startled her. When she turned, Lucien was there, cloaked in shadow but unmistakable. How did you? The mark, he said softly. It lets me know when you're in distress. She blinked. You could feel that? Yes. He stepped closer, his eyes catching the moonlight. Someone upset you. Cedric, she said bitterly. His returned. Lucien's expression darkened. The one who mocked you. The same. He paced once, every movement quiet and controlled. He's dangerous, Ilara. Men who build power from cruelty always are. I'm not afraid of him. I am. Lucien's tone left no room for pride. He'll use every rumor he can to wound you. And through you, he'll try to reach me. Let him try. Lucien looked at her for a long moment, then reached out and touched the pendant at her throat. Keep this close. It will warn you if he approaches again. She nodded. You can sense him? His kind leaves trails, heat, greed, envy. Easy to follow. She hesitated, then asked quietly, what would you do if he hurt me? His eyes turned silver, cold as moonlight. He wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Ilara's breath caught. Lucien. He forced himself to breathe, to soften. Forgive me. The oath I took binds me to protect those under my mark. But I would protect you even without it. She reached up, laying her hand against his cheek. His skin was cool, smooth as stone. You can't fight the whole world for me. I don't need to fight the world, he said softly. Only those who forget your worth. Outside, thunder rolled. For a moment, the lightning illuminated them both, the broken heiress and the immortal prince, standing close enough to feel each other's heartbeats. When the thunder faded, he whispered, if he confronts you again, summon me. Say my name aloud. The shadows will answer. And then he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of roses and rain. 2 days later, Cedric did exactly what Lucien had feared. He returned not to the Vance estate but to the Duchess's banquet, the largest gathering of the season. He arrived early, spreading poisonous charm among the nobles. Ilara knew none of this until she arrived herself, unwillingly dragged there by her mother. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and gold trim, laughter echoing off marble walls. Yet she felt the tension before she even crossed the threshold. Cedric approached at once, bowing deeply. Lady Ilara, how brave of you to show your face after the tales making their rounds. What tales? She asked evenly. He smiled. Oh, you haven't heard. They say your prince drinks more than wine. A ripple of laughter moved through the nearby guests. Ilara's hands trembled, but her voice stayed calm. People who live in glass houses, Lord Cedric, shouldn't throw stones. Especially when their hearts are hollow. His smile faltered. Before he could reply, a sudden chill swept through the room. The candles flickered. Shadows lengthened along the walls. Then the crowd parted. Lucien stood in the doorway, tall and composed, eyes glinting like steel. He hadn't been invited, and yet every noble instinctively stepped aside. Cedric blanched. You. Lucien's tone was quiet, but it cut like a blade. Lord Cedric. I hear you enjoy speaking of me in public. I speak only the truth, Cedric said, regaining his sneer. That you're a fraud hiding behind title and darkness. Lucien smiled faintly. Darkness reveals more truth than sunlight ever will. He turned to Ilara and offered his hand. Dance with me. The ballroom held its breath. Cedric's face turned crimson. Ilara hesitated only a second, then placed her hand in Lucien's. Music began, slow, haunting. As they moved across the floor, the crowd murmured. Every motion was perfect. Lucien's steps guided hers until it seemed she was gliding rather than walking. Her limp vanished within his rhythm. When the dance ended, Lucien bowed, and applause thundered. Cedric's humiliation was complete. His eyes burned with fury as he turned on his heel and left the hall. Lucien leaned close and whispered, "He won't stop, you know." "I don't care," she whispered back. "Let him see that I'm not his to destroy." And somewhere deep in the night, something inside her shifted from fear to defiance, from shame to strength. The storm arrived with the new moon. The sky hung low, the clouds bleeding silver rain. Ilara felt restless all day, a pressure in her chest she couldn't explain. When evening came, another invitation arrived, this one embossed with gold and sealed by the royal council. "The king himself requests our presence," her mother gasped. "A royal feast. Ilara, this could be your redemption." Ilara felt an unease she couldn't shake. "Or my ruin," she murmured. Still, she dressed. The gown was deep wine red, chosen by her mother to make her unforgettable. The pendant at her throat pulsed faintly, as though alive. The banquet hall of the palace was grander than any she'd ever seen, vaulted ceilings, rows of candles, the smell of roasted meat and polished silver. Yet the air felt heavy, too quiet beneath the laughter. Whispers followed her as she entered. "That's her. The crippled girl who bewitched the prince. A curse, they say." Lucien stood at the far end of the hall beside the royal dais. He looked different tonight, formal, regal, but colder somehow. When their eyes met, she felt a strange message in his look: be cautious. Halfway through the meal, the king rose to speak. "We celebrate unity tonight," he said. "And yet, rumors divide us. Some claim creatures of the night walk among our noble ranks. Let us put such nonsense to rest." A murmur swept through the hall. Lucien did not move. Then Cedric stood. "If the court wishes proof, perhaps Prince Vale will indulge us with a toast. In daylight, perhaps." Laughter rippled around the tables. Ilara's blood ran cold. She understood then, the feast wasn't celebration. It was a trap. Lucien's voice remained calm. "I honor your request." He lifted his goblet. The red liquid inside shimmered. "To truth." He drank, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the candles dimmed. The windows rattled as thunder cracked outside. The wine in every glass darkened to black. Gasps filled the room. Lucien lowered his goblet. "You wished for truth," he said, voice echoing strangely. "Here it stands before you." His eyes glowed faintly silver, his reflection vanished from the polished goblet. Panic rippled through the nobles. Cedric stumbled back. The king shouted, "Guards!" Ilara rose, shouting above the noise. "Stop! He's no monster." Lucien's gaze found hers. "Ilara." She ran to him as soldiers drew blades. "Don't," she pleaded. "You'll kill them." "I won't harm them," he said softly. "But they will not harm you." He raised a hand. The torches flared, and every sword flew from its owner's grasp, clattering harmlessly to the floor. A wind rushed through the hall, extinguishing every light except the one burning above him. Then silence. Lucien turned to the king. "You see now what I am. And yet I have harmed no one. Fear is the true poison here, not blood." The king, pale and trembling, could only nod. Lucien looked at Ilara, his expression gentler. "I warned you, their cruelty would come for us both." She stepped closer. "Then let it. I'm not leaving you." He smiled faintly, sadness in his eyes. "Then you are braver than the world deserves." Guards escorted them out but did not dare touch him. Outside, rain poured in sheets, the sky alive with lightning. Lucien turned to her beneath the storm. "This changes everything. The court will hunt me now. And you. Will stand beside you," she said. He looked at her, rain streaking down his pale face. "Ilara, the path ahead is dark." "I've lived in darkness all my life," she said. "At least this one has purpose." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he took her hand and pressed it to his chest. Then our fates are one. Lightning split the sky, illuminating them in white fire. Somewhere behind the clouds, the moon broke free, casting silver light on the drenched courtyard. Lucien lifted her hand to his lips. Whatever comes next, remember this night. The night truth burned brighter than fear. And though thunder roared and the palace bells began to ring alarms, Elara felt only peace, the fierce, unshakable calm of a woman who had already chosen her side. The following dawn broke red. The storm that had battered the palace through the night left streets flooded and the world washed clean, yet nothing felt pure. News of what had happened at the royal feast spread faster than the rain. By mid-morning, Elara's name filled every mouth in the city. The cursed girl, they called her. The vampire's bride. When she and her mother returned to Vance Manor, the servants' faces were pale. A single letter waited on the front table, sealed with the king's crest. Marianne tore it open with trembling fingers. Her voice quavered as she read aloud. By order of the Royal Council, Lady Elara Vance is hereby summoned for questioning regarding her involvement in the concealment of Prince Lucien Vale's unnatural condition. She is to present herself before the council within 3 days. Elara's heart clenched. They mean to use me against him. Her mother looked at her, panic breaking through her usual poise. We'll leave. We'll go to the coast, to your uncle. They won't find us there. Elara shook her head. Running would prove them right. Marianne gripped her arm. You don't understand, Elara. They fear him, and they will punish you to send him a message. But Elara only said, softly but firmly, I made my choice, mother. That night, she waited until the household slept. Then she took her cloak, the pendant Lucien had given her, and stepped out into the rain. The silver mark on her palm glowed faintly, guiding her. The forest was alive with whispers, not words, but the language of leaves and wind. Every sound pulled her deeper toward Vale Manor. When she reached the gate, the torches blazed to life on their own. Lucien was waiting in the courtyard, his coat dark and glistening with rain. I thought you'd come, he said quietly. You knew. He nodded. The council's messengers are not subtle. They plan to charge you with treason. They'll call me a demon and you my accomplice. They'll destroy my family's name. I can stop them, he said, voice low, almost dangerous. If I reveal myself to the king fully, if I take the oath of blood before the throne, it would prove my loyalty. Would it? Elara asked bitterly. Or would it make them fear you more? Lucien turned away, jaw tightening. You're right. Fear always grows when fed with truth. He crossed the courtyard, stopping beneath the stone archway. There is another way, he said. One I swore never to use again. Elara followed. What way? To call the High Shadow. His tone dropped to a whisper, reverent and grim. The Ancient One who bound my kind to this world. He listens to those marked by the oath, to those who carry both mortal and immortal blood. Elara felt the air grow colder. You mean me? Yes. She shook her head. I don't understand. He faced her then, eyes bright with something that wasn't quite hope. The mark on your hand links us. You carry a trace of my blood now, the night of the oath bound it to you. With your voice, the High Shadow might listen. You could command his judgment. Command, a god. Lucien's mouth curved in a bitter smile. Something older than gods. He decides what lives and what fades. Elara felt fear coil in her stomach. And if I fail? Then he'll take what he marked you, and me both. She looked at him for a long moment. You're asking me to risk my life. I'm asking you to save it, both of ours, he said. And perhaps the world's faith in what's left of us. Elara's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. Then show me what to do. He led her back to the chamber beneath the manor, the place of the silver chalice and carved constellations. The air hummed like the pause before thunder. Lucien drew a blade across his palm again, the silver blood welling up. It must begin with your voice, he said. Call his name. I don't know it. You do. It's already in you. Elara closed her eyes. The chamber's shadows pressed close. Somewhere deep inside her, a word surfaced, dark, ancient, and cold. She whispered it, and the torches extinguished themselves in an instant. The darkness wasn't empty. It moved. It breathed. A voice that wasn't a voice filled the air. Who summons the first of night? Elara trembled but forced her words out. I am Elara Vance. I stand beside the Prince of Vale. A mortal dares to speak in my hall, the shadow murmured. Why should I listen? Because you gave him this curse, she said fiercely. And because I've seen the man beneath it. The air shivered. Bold words from something so fragile. Lucian took her hand, his strength steady through the fear. She is not fragile, he said. She is what we were meant to protect. The dark pulsed around them, rising like a wave. You seek redemption for what cannot be redeemed. Then let it be transformation, Elara said. Let the living and the night walk beside each other again. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Then the shadow laughed, a sound that shook the earth. Very well, it said at last. But all bargains require blood. Before she could react, a silver light cut through the dark, piercing her palm. Pain lanced up her arm, but she didn't pull away. Lucian shouted her name, but she held firm. The mark on her hand burned like fire. Then the light faded. The shadow was gone. The torches flared back to life. Lucian caught her before she collapsed. You fool, he whispered, voice breaking. You've bound yourself completely. Elara opened her eyes. Did it work? He looked around the chamber. The carvings on the walls glowed faintly gold now, not silver. Yes, he said softly. The High Shadow accepted your plea. What does that mean? It means we are no longer cursed, he said. But neither are we free. We are joined. My fate is tied to yours now utterly. Elara tried to smile, though exhaustion blurred her vision. Then we'll face it together. He held her close, her head against his chest. His heartbeat, slow, steady, immortal, pulsed beneath her ear. For the first time since she'd met him, it sounded strong. Outside, the rain stopped. The first light of dawn broke through the storm clouds, washing the horizon in pale gold. For the first time in centuries, Vale Manor stood in sunlight and did not burn. The council summoned her again, but this time she did not go alone. Lucian insisted on accompanying her. The capital was tense as they entered. Citizens lined the streets, watching in fearful silence. Some made the sign of protection as Lucian passed, but others simply stared, curiosity winning over superstition. Inside the throne room, the king sat surrounded by advisors. Cedric stood near the dais, his face pale but defiant. Lucian bowed, every movement regal. Your Majesty, we come not to beg forgiveness but to end the fear that divides our people. The king's voice was cold. You unleashed power in my hall, Prince Vale. You frightened my guests, defied my guards, and exposed the realm to whatever you are. Lucian met his gaze calmly. Then let me expose it again, openly, without deceit. He reached for Elara's hand. When their palms met, light flared between them, not the cold silver of the night before, but warm gold. Gasps echoed through the chamber. This bond, Lucian said, was forged before your time. But she has changed it. Through her, shadow and light now coexist. Harm her, and you destroy me. Accept her, and you save us both. Cedric stepped forward, face twisting. You expect us to believe this magic nonsense? Lucian's eyes glinted. Do you believe in what you saw at the feast? In fear? Then believe this. She is the balance you sought to destroy. Elara spoke, her voice steady. I was born human, yes. But I've seen what you call monsters weep for mercy while men laughed. If that is humanity, perhaps we need more monsters. The king leaned forward. And what do you ask, Lady Vance? Let him live as he is, she said simply. Let both worlds live without shame. The king studied her, then looked to Lucian. You love her. Lucian's tone softened. I do. And she you? Yes. The old man sighed. Then the law of this court cannot touch what the heavens themselves seem to bless. But you must leave this city. The people are not ready. Lucian bowed. That is mercy enough. Cedric's face darkened. You can't let them walk free. She's bewitched him, bewitched us. Ilara turned to him. No spell can make a man cruel, Cedric. You managed that well enough on your own. The court erupted in murmurs. Cedric stepped toward her, but Lucien moved faster, his presence freezing the air. Do not test me again, he said softly. I am no longer bound by your rules. The king raised a hand. Enough. This matter is ended. Leave this hall before I change my mind. Lucien nodded, then guided Ilara out. The moment the palace doors closed behind them, she released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It's over, she said. He looked down at her. No. It's beginning. They rode through the city in silence, passing markets and alleys that had once whispered her name in pity. Now people bowed their heads, not in mockery, but in wary respect. When they reached Vale Manor, the gardens were alive with new color. The ghost roses had turned crimson, glowing faintly under the fading sun. Lucien led her to the fountain. The world will speak of us, he said. Some with hatred, some with hope. You must choose which voice to carry. Ilara knelt beside the water, watching their reflections shimmer together. I choose both. I've lived in darkness long enough to know that light means nothing without it. Lucien smiled. Then you understand more than most immortals ever will. He took her hand, the golden mark glowing faintly between them. You've given me back the day, Ilara. Let me give you eternity. She looked up at him, eyes bright with both love and fear. Eternity sounds lonely. Not if we walk it together. The evening wind brushed through the roses, carrying their scent across the courtyard. She hesitated, then nodded. Then yes. Lucien's hands framed her face. Close your eyes. When his lips touched hers, warmth spread through her like sunlight. The golden mark flared, then faded. The pain that had haunted her leg for years vanished like mist in morning light. When she opened her eyes again, she could see the world differently, sharper, brighter, deeper. She could hear the heartbeat of the earth, the whisper of every leaf. Lucien smiled. Welcome to forever. She looked at her reflection in the fountain, the same face, but new eyes, glowing faintly gold. I'm not afraid, she said. You never were. Together they stood, watching the sun sink beyond the horizon. For the first time in memory, Lucien did not fade when darkness fell. And as night claimed the sky, the roses bloomed again, blood-red, gold-tipped, eternal. Ilara turned to him. What happens now? He smiled, eyes filled with promise. Now, we teach the world that neither light nor shadow can exist alone. And beneath the rising moon, the Prince of Darkness and the broken heiress began their new reign not as curse and cure, but as two halves of the same everlasting light. Weeks passed. The capital's fires of gossip burned themselves out, replaced by silence and unease. The king's decree had exiled Lucien and Ilara from the royal city, but their story had already become legend, the cursed prince and the broken girl who defied both throne and night. At Vale Manor, the world changed quietly. The gardens, once grey and dormant, now pulsed with strange life. Roses bloomed even in shadow, fountains whispered melodies that hadn't been heard in centuries, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. Ilara had begun to move without her cane, her steps sure and steady. Her healing was slow but real, not magic exactly, but a merging of two worlds that now lived in her veins. Lucien watched her often from the terrace, silent, his expression unreadable. He had lived hundreds of years, yet nothing in those long nights had prepared him for her, a mortal girl whose courage had forced the sun itself to return to his cursed lands. One evening, as twilight bled across the sky, Ilara found him standing before the fountain that marked their bond. He was staring into the water, eyes distant. You've been quiet all day, she said softly, approaching him. What is it? He didn't look up. The hunter's moon rises tonight. The what? He finally turned to face her. Once every 100 years, the old orders gather. Hunters, priests, those who believe their purpose is to destroy beings like me. It's a ritual of cleansing. They track down any creature who breaks the boundary between shadow and light. Ilara's stomach sank. And because of me, you've crossed that line. Lucien nodded. Our bond has already drawn attention. I can feel them moving closer, the same way I feel storms before they break. She reached for his hand. Then we'll leave. No, his voice was calm but final. If we run, they'll chase us forever. If we stand, we might earn peace. You're talking about fighting, she said, her voice low. You don't have to fight anymore, Lucian. You've already suffered enough. He smiled faintly. It's not suffering to protect what I love. Elara looked at him, her chest tightening. Then we fight together. He shook his head gently. You've already risked too much. This is my burden. She stepped closer, eyes fierce. You told me once we were bound. That our fates were joined. So if this fight comes, it comes for me too. Lucian stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Then we prepare. The night of the hunter's moon was unlike any other. The air was electric, sharp with frost and power. A pale red glow bled across the sky as the moon rose, full, enormous, and heavy with old magic. Elara stood at the edge of the rose garden, dressed in black velvet and silver thread. Around her neck hung Lucian's pendant, now glowing faintly gold. She could feel the mark on her palm burning with energy, a pulse that matched Lucian's heartbeat even from across the courtyard. They're coming, he said, his voice barely a whisper. How many? More than I hoped. Fewer than I feared. From the shadows beyond the gates, figures emerged, cloaked men and women carrying blades etched with holy symbols, their armor glinting in the crimson light. At their head was a tall woman with hair the color of white ash. Her eyes burned with cold purpose. Lucian Vale, she called. By the law of the eternal night, you are summoned to judgment. Lucian stepped forward. I am no longer bound by that law. The curse has been changed. By mortal blood, the woman spat. You've tainted the old order. Elara moved beside him, her voice steady. He hasn't tainted anything. He's healed it. The woman's gaze snapped to her. You are the mortal girl. The vessel. Vessel? Elara repeated, her pulse quickening. Lucian's hand tightened around hers. Don't listen. But the huntress smiled coldly. Did he not tell you? The balance he spoke of, the bond between you, comes with a cost. For every immortal who walks in daylight, one mortal must give up her place among the living. Elara froze. That's not true. The huntress's eyes gleamed. Ask him. Lucian's silence was answer enough. She turned to him, disbelief and betrayal cutting through her voice. Tell me she's lying. He looked at her, pain in his eyes. The balance must be kept. I meant to bear the price myself. I would have traded my immortality for your life. Elara's voice broke. And instead, you tied me to you. I thought I could protect you, he said, anguish threading every word. If the bond was shared, neither of us would have to die. The huntress laughed softly. How noble. How foolish. The moon will not be cheated. It will take one of you before the dawn. Elara looked between them, Lucian, the huntress, the sea of blades glinting in the blood-colored light. Fear washed over her, but beneath it burned something stronger, resolve. Then it won't take either of us, she said. Lucian's eyes widened. Elara, no. But she had already stepped forward, raising her hand. The mark on her palm burst into golden fire. The light spread outward, flaring like wings made of sunlight. The hunters staggered back, shielding their eyes. The roses around her began to glow, their petals shimmering with gold and red. The fountain behind them surged with light. Elara's voice was clear and ringing. I am not a vessel. I am not a curse. I am the bridge. The ground trembled. The crimson moon above flickered, the red fading into silver. The huntress dropped to her knees, her weapon clattering to the ground. Lucian moved toward her, his voice breaking. You can't, Elara, you'll burn yourself out. But she smiled, calm even as light poured from her. Maybe. But if one of us must give something, let it be my fear. Then she closed her eyes. The light pulsed once, bright enough to turn night into day, and everything went still. When the glow faded, the hunters were gone. The moon hung pale and silver again. And Elara lay motionless among the roses, her hand still glowing faintly. Lucian fell to his knees beside her. Elara, he whispered. Please. Wake up. Her chest rose once, then again. Slowly, She opened her eyes. "It's quiet," she murmured. He brushed a tear from her cheek. "You silenced the storm." She smiled weakly. "Then it worked." Lucien pulled her into his arms. "You foolish, fearless woman." Her fingers brushed his jaw. "You always said balance demanded both shadow and light. Now we are both." The golden mark on her hand pulsed one last time, then faded, not gone, but settled, peaceful. For the first time in 1,000 years, the night around Vale Manor was still. When morning came, sunlight touched the windows of Vale Manor freely. No mist, no warding spells, only light, pure and warm. The curse that had haunted the estate for generations was gone. Elara woke to birdsong. She felt weak but alive, her hand clasped in Lucien's. He sat beside her bed, still in the clothes he'd worn through the night, his dark hair damp with dew. "You didn't leave," she said softly. "I wouldn't have," he replied. "You brought peace back to this place." She smiled faintly. "You look human." He raised an eyebrow. "Do I?" "You do," she said, studying him. His skin was warmer now, his heartbeat stronger, his eyes no longer silver but a deep grey blue. "You're changing." "So are you," he said, glancing at her. "Your pulse, it echoes mine." She looked down at her hands, the mark was gone entirely. "What does that mean?" He hesitated, then smiled. "It means we found what the High Shadow promised. The balance between two worlds. Not immortal, not mortal, something new." Elara exhaled slowly, letting the truth settle. She wasn't dying. She wasn't cursed. She was alive in a way she had never been before, part light, part shadow, whole at last. Lucien stood and walked to the window. Beyond the garden walls, the forest glimmered with morning dew. For the first time in his endless memory, the sun touched his skin, and he didn't flinch. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's freedom," he said quietly. They spent that day walking through the estate, no longer in secrecy, but in light. The servants who had once whispered now bowed in awe. Villagers from nearby towns approached the gates cautiously, bringing flowers and offerings, murmuring blessings instead of curses. Word had spread, the prince's land was no longer haunted. The night had been tamed. As the days passed, life at Vale Manor began to flourish. The roses bloomed in colors unseen before, silver, gold, crimson, and white. The air carried music again, faint and sweet. Travelers came to see the miracle garden, and none left untouched by its calm. But peace, Elara knew, was never simple. One evening as the sun set, she found Lucien standing at the edge of the forest, his gaze distant. "You're thinking again," she teased gently. He smiled. "Always. What worries you?" "The world will come looking for answers," he said. "They'll want to understand how we broke the curse. Some will come seeking power. Others, vengeance." Elara touched his arm. "Then we'll teach them. The truth, not the fear." He turned to her, his expression soft. "You'd make a better ruler than I ever was." "I don't want to rule," she said, smiling. "I want to live." Lucien took her hand and placed it over his heart. "Then live with me. As long as the world allows." She leaned against him, the two of them watching as the last light faded into twilight. "Do you think they'll ever stop fearing the dark?" she asked. "Maybe not," he said. "But they'll remember that light can grow from it." They stood there until the stars appeared, brighter than either had ever seen. Somewhere in the distance, bells rang from the capital, but they no longer sounded like warnings. They sounded like beginnings. Later that night, Lucien led her back to the fountain where their story had begun. The water shimmered gold beneath the moon. "I used to think eternity was a curse," he said. "That to live forever was to be alone forever. But I was wrong." Elara smiled. "Because eternity isn't about time, Lucien. It's about meaning." He nodded. "And you've given me mine." She bent down, dipping her fingers into the water. Ripples spread outward, catching the light. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" "Always," he said. "But for the first time, I look forward to finding out." The night was quiet except for the sound of the fountain and the whisper of wind through roses. Above them, the moon shone silver-white, no longer the hunter's moon, but a guardian's. Ilara turned to him. You once said I'd taught you how to live again. But you did the same for me. You showed me that broken things can still shine. Lucian brushed a strand of hair from her face. Then let us both shine, together. As they kissed beneath the starlit sky, the golden light from the fountain rose around them, swirling upward like fireflies. It carried with it every fear, every sorrow, every echo of the past, until only peace remained. And when dawn came again, it found them side by side, no longer the cursed prince and the crippled girl, but something new, something whole. Two souls reborn, standing at the threshold of a world finally ready to believe in both the dark and the light. Months had passed since the night the curse was broken, but peace in the realm was as fragile as a whisper. Vale Manor stood radiant, alive with color and song, yet beyond its blooming gardens the world was shifting. The people of Eldermere had begun to speak Lucian's name not as fear, but as fascination. Some came to seek blessings, others to beg for cures that only myths promised. Ilara saw them every morning, pilgrims kneeling by the outer walls, leaving flowers, coins, even locks of hair. To them, she was no longer the broken girl. They called her the Light-Bearer. At first, the name made her smile. But as weeks turned to months, a strange weight began to settle over her. They've turned me into a story, she said one morning as she joined Lucian in the courtyard. Not a person. A myth. Lucian was standing by the fountain, his long coat stirring in the wind. People need stories, he said quietly. They make sense of what they fear. She frowned. But they don't know us. They don't know what it cost. He looked up at the morning sky, the same sky that now welcomed him freely. If they knew, they'd worship the pain instead of the peace. Let them believe in the ending, not the battle. Ilara sighed, brushing her fingers along the edge of the fountain. You sound like you've accepted it. I have to. I've lived long enough to know that truth rarely survives the telling. Before she could reply, a shout came from the gate. One of the guards, a young man from the nearby village, came running, breathless. Your Grace, he called. There's someone here to see you. Says he carries a message from the king. Lucian exchanged a glance with Ilara, then nodded. Bring him in. Moments later, a cloaked rider entered the courtyard. He dismounted, bowing low. The seal on his satchel gleamed with the royal crest. My lord, the messenger said, the king sends his greetings and his concern. Strange sightings have been reported in the northern woods, shadows that move without wind, creatures that speak in whispers. The council believes it may be remnants of your curse, or something worse. Lucian's expression darkened. Worse. The messenger hesitated. Survivors say the darkness wears human faces. Ilara's blood ran cold. What does that mean? Lucian turned away. It means the balance is bleeding again. When the old curse broke, it may have freed more than just me. The messenger bowed again and handed Lucian a small obsidian token marked with a silver sigil, the king's seal of trust. The council asks for your aid. If you refuse, they will send the hunters instead. Lucian closed his hand around the token. Tell His Majesty I will come, but not to serve his fear. When the messenger was gone, Ilara stepped closer. You're going? Yes. Then I'm coming with you. He met her gaze. You've just begun to live again, Ilara. Don't throw yourself back into danger. She smiled sadly. You forget, I was born in danger. The difference is, now I know how to walk through it. Lucian's lips curved faintly, but there was no humor in his eyes. Then we leave at dusk. The journey north took 3 days. The forests grew darker as they rode, the trees twisted and heavy with mist. Every night, they camped under strange skies, and Ilara dreamed of whispers that spoke in a language she almost understood. By the time they reached the king's outpost, the soldiers stationed there were trembling. We've lost 2 patrols already, said the captain, his voice low. Whatever it is, it's not natural. It takes form from shadow, moves like smoke. One man swore he saw your face, my lord. Lucian's jaw tightened. Then it's not a creature. It's an echo. An echo? Ilara asked. He looked toward the dark forest. The curse didn't vanish, it fractured. Pieces of it still cling to the old places. They've learned to mimic life. That night, under the pale moon, they followed the trail into the forest. The air grew cold, heavy. Every branch creaked like a warning. "Elara," Lucian said quietly, "if you see something that looks like me, don't approach it." She gripped his hand. "You think I'd mistake a shadow for you? They'll try to trick you with memory," he said. "They know what you love most." The deeper they went, the thicker the mist became. Then, faintly, Elara heard her own voice, distant, echoing through the trees. "Lucian," it whispered. "Lucian, help me." Her heart leapt. She turned and froze. There, half hidden by fog, stood a figure that looked exactly like her. Same hair, same eyes, same soft expression. Only the smile was wrong, too wide, too empty. "Elara." Lucian's voice cut through the haze. "Stay with me." The shadow Elara tilted its head. "He'll never be free while you live," it said in her voice. "You're the weight he carries." Rage flared in her chest. "You don't know him." The doppelganger's smile twisted. "I am him." And then, before she could react, another figure stepped from the darkness, Lucian's face, Lucian's voice. "She will never forgive you for binding her, you know. She dreams of freedom, not you." Lucian moved between them, his real form radiating faint golden light. "You're remnants," he said. "Empty things. You feed on fear." The shadows hissed, their forms warping. "Fear is all that made you." Lucian's eyes burned. "Not anymore." He drew his blade, one forged from silver and sunlight, and plunged it into the ground. Light exploded outward, dissolving the shadows like smoke in wind. When silence fell, Elara sank to her knees, shaking. Lucian caught her in his arms. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "No. Just shaken." He brushed his fingers through her hair. "They can't touch us anymore. You're stronger than they know." She smiled faintly. "So are you." Above them, the clouds parted just enough for the moon to shine through. For the first time, Lucian's shadow stretched beside hers, not as curse, but as proof that he now truly lived. The next morning, the forest was still. The soldiers rejoiced when Lucian told them the darkness was gone, though he said nothing of what they had truly faced. As they rode home, Elara leaned against him, watching sunlight break through the trees. "You said echoes feed on fear. Then what happens when there's no fear left?" Lucian smiled. "Then they starve." She tilted her head. "And what happens to us?" He looked down at her, eyes soft. "Then we live." When they returned to Vale Manor, spring had arrived. The roses glowed brighter than ever, and the people of the nearby villages had begun calling the estate the garden between worlds. Travelers came from across the kingdom, scholars, healers, poets, all seeking to learn from the union of light and shadow that had reshaped their world. Elara welcomed them kindly, but she refused worship. "I'm not a goddess," she would tell them with a laugh. "Just a stubborn woman who refused to die." Lucian became a quiet ruler, guiding rather than commanding. He built sanctuaries across the realm, places where the sick and weary could rest, where knowledge of the old ways could live beside the new. And though he never claimed a throne, people began to call him the Daylord, a title whispered with reverence and fear alike. But peace, as always, carried its price. One morning, a royal messenger arrived again, this time not with a plea, but with an invitation. The king, old and failing, wished to see them both before his death. Elara hesitated. "After everything, you'd still go?" Lucian nodded. He was not a kind man, but he was fair in his own way. "If he dies believing the world safer because of what we did, then perhaps that's enough." They traveled to the capital once more, not as fugitives, but as honored guests. The palace had changed. Where there had once been fear, now stood murals of roses and moonlight. The king, frail and pale, awaited them in a sunlit chamber. "You came," he said, his voice a rasp. Lucian bowed. "You asked." The king looked between them, eyes dim but thoughtful. "When I first heard your names, I saw danger. Now I see balance. My grandchildren will inherit a world where day and night no longer war." He reached out a trembling hand to Elara. "You gave hope to mortals again. Guard it well." "I will," she promised. That night, the king died peacefully. The bells rang across the capital, and the people gathered under torchlight to mourn. Ilara and Lucien stood together on the palace balcony, watching the flames flicker in the streets below. "He was right," she said softly. "The world feels different." Lucien nodded. "Because the old fears are fading. But something new will rise to take their place. That's the way of things. Then we'll meet it together." He smiled. "Always." Years passed. The manor became a sanctuary for all, human and not, light and shadow alike. Children played in the rose gardens, chasing petals that glowed like starlight. Songs were written about the prince who walked in sunlight and the woman whose courage bridged the worlds. Ilara grew older, though not as fast as mortals should. Her reflection stayed youthful, her heart steady. One evening, she sat by the fountain, watching the water shimmer gold. Lucien joined her quietly, kneeling beside her. "You're thinking again," he said, the same way he had all those years ago. She smiled. "I was remembering the feast, how I was so afraid to dance with you. And now?" She looked at him, eyes soft. "Now, I can't imagine a world where I don't." He took her hand, and together they stood, moving slowly to music only they could hear. The garden glowed faintly around them, the air filled with the scent of roses and rain. When the dance ended, Lucien brushed a kiss against her forehead. "You once asked what happens after eternity," he whispered. She nodded. "And what's your answer now?" He smiled. "We keep living until the stars forget our names." Ilara laughed quietly. "Then they never will." As night settled over Vale Manor, the two figures stood bathed in starlight, symbols of a world reborn. And though centuries would pass, and kingdoms would rise and fall, their story endured, a tale of courage, of balance, of love that taught even the shadows how to dream again. In the end, it wasn't magic that saved them. It was the simple, relentless truth they had both come to believe, that light and darkness were never enemies. They were two halves of the same promise. That no heart, no matter how broken or cursed, was beyond the reach of love. And beneath the eternal moon, the garden bloomed forever. And that was only the beginning. If this story touched you, if it made you believe that even in the darkest nights, light can still bloom, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button to keep the story alive. Leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. And subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of love, mystery, and redemption. Because here, every story has a heartbeat. And the next one might just steal yours.